This is Mario Andretti, and you're listening to Fascination Street podcast.
AV in your ears, that's Ambush being giving you this audio visual down the most interesting street in the world with my boy Steve, Fascination Street. You already know, let's get it when you whip in the Fascination Street. What do you...
Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with Stewart Anstead. Stewart Anstead is an artist. He does all kinds of crazy paintings. He's got a very unique style, and it was a pleasure to have him on. In this episode, we talk about where he was born and raised and what got his eye turned toward art in general. We talk a little bit about his marketing career, which helped him when he eventually became a professional artist. Of course, we talk about some of his pieces, some of the people who have them, and we talk about where you can get them or even see them in galleries. We talk a lot about his unique style that I haven't seen from anybody else. They're really, really beautiful paintings. You go check them out. This is my conversation with artist and painter Stewart Anstead.
Prepare to be fascinated. Prepare to be fascinated. Prepare to be fascinated.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Stewart Anstead. How you doing today, man?
Hey, it's a good day. How about yourself, man?
I cannot complain. Stewart, what I like to do is I like to start from the beginning, man. It helps us understand how you got to where you are. So, where were you born and raised? Where'd you grow up?
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me on. It means a lot. So I'm a Northern California kid.
Gross.
And diehard Giants fan, 49er fan, all that. And my family lived in a college community, Chico, California. We first started out in North Bay, and then we moved to Chico when I was really young. So I was pretty much raised there through high school, and it was a college town that had a real affinity for the arts. It showed up in the rock concerts we had. You know, we had some of the really interesting groups that I think were Bay Area products that came through Chico. We would ride our bikes and go listen to the live outdoor concerts. So there was a big art scene, and one of the more interesting things I think to me was that some of the first intentional murals I ever saw were sponsored by the college, and they put in, I don't know, it was maybe a dozen large-scale on-building murals, paintings that used the trompe-l'oeil techniques, stuff that looked realistic. It looked like there was marble that was chipped away on a building and marble columns and chaos and stuff. The images of people jumping to try to catch a ladder that was actually on the building, you know, really interesting, fun things like that. Anyway, so that really impressed me, and I, as a young person who drive by them all the time, it made me think about art in my environment more than, you know, trying to do stuff at home like we all did. And that enlarged my mind. Chico was just a happening little place that has a bad reputation, probably well earned, about being a party school, a party town.
What school is it?
Chico State.
Oh, okay.
Cal State University, Chico.
What are they famous for? Like, I'm not a big college. I don't know shit about colleges. What's their thing?
Let's see. What's their thing? The thing is that they were pretty liberal. They were basically a mini version of Berkeley University.
Okay.
So whatever happened at Cal happened in Chico. And I didn't quite know that. I thought Chico was the big leader at the time, and that these horrible things spilled out in Berkeley. They had the sit-ins. It was the mid to late 60s and the 70s, you know, and if there was something happening there, it was something happening in Chico. But it also has this reputation of being pretty wild and free-flowing, and that's life. But anyway, it was an influence on me, and I think quite for the good. People there were great, and I had an art teacher, to your point. An art teacher lived right down the road from us. My best friend his name was Chris Ramsden. His dad was an art teacher at the high school. Chris and I would be working on little things, and he would come in and make some fun comments and kind of say, hey, what have you considered doing that? Creating a little art thing for scouts or whatever. And that was kind of fun to have a built-in mentor, it turned out to be. So in high school, I took a class. This was an influential moment in my life. So there we are, 10th grade, never took an art class. I liked doing art stuff, crafty stuff, but that was about it. But So I'm now taking a class. There's 2 art teachers, Mr. Simpson, Mr. Ramsden. I took an art class from Mr. Simpson. It was great. But it started out having an early project. I think I was doing okay with drawing, but now we moved up to watercolors, with large format watercolors. And whatever I was trying to attempt, it was like it was a lake with sailboats, something to that effect. And it was awful. I didn't like it. I didn't like the process. I didn't like what I was doing. Watercolor turns out is very difficult to do well. How would I know? Anyway, so I got really frustrated and I kind of just set it down. And my teacher, Mr. Simpson, sat down next to me during class, not a big deal. And he said, "It looks like you've kind of stopped here." I said, "Yeah, I don't think this is working the way I want it to. So clearly I'm not very good at this. So maybe I should move along," right? So he gave me some suggestions. And one of the suggestions was, if you want, and it was all up to me, if you want, we can scrub this off, start over. So I said, sure, let's do that. Let's try that. Okay, so I sponged it off. I started over. And he said, when you're trying to do these other details, what if watercolor is your soft underpainting, and then let's go in with a felt tip black marker and let's go and do pointillism over that. So you can define the edges, define the trees, define the boats, that kind of stuff. And so I did that, and I was having more progress because it was working with where my brain was. It wasn't that I suddenly became this good artist. I didn't. But to my surprise, when it was done, I liked it. And to my surprise, the end of that week or whatever, for a whole week, they put that painting on the wall where one student was pointed out as being the art student of the week. Okay. So I'm thinking, well, there's really some awesome artists in this class. So I know I'm not the best artist. I know that. I'm not really sure what's going on. And my teacher told me, well, you were willing to listen to instruction. You're willing to try something new. You overcame a roadblock and you basically succeeded in moving forward, So that was the reason. And that really affected my thinking, because I was going, oh, if you can do art and mess up, that's okay. There's ways to get around those things. Did you ever have that kind of experience doing art where you kind of get stopped?
Not with physical art like you're talking about, like drawings and paintings and stuff like that. When I was super young, maybe middle school, I saw my mom had drawn, I don't know, just like a little girl in a dress holding a teddy bear or something like that. And I thought it was the coolest drawing I'd ever seen. And so I was like, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to try drawing. I'm a big boy. I'm going to try drawing. And so the first thing I think I ever drew was, I was really big into Popeye at the time. And so I had a VHS cassette of just, 15 or 20 Popeye cartoons. And so I just drew Popeye off of the front of the VHS. And I was like, oh my gosh, this was amazing. Now, I guess maybe to your point of scrubbing, there was a lot of eraser going on.
Yeah.
I was erasing a lot of stuff.
I still do.
Oh, good. I guess that's why they still make erasers, right? But then I moved on to like drawing, and this is going to sound super weird, but band names. Like Metallica has a very specific font, and Megadeth had a very specific font, and just all these different band names where it would just look dope as shit. And so I would try to draw those, and I eventually would, and I would draw them, and then I would laminate them with like some packing tape or whatever and hang them on my door, just a little punk kid doing whatever. And then finally I decided that I wanted to draw something that I had with me all the time. And so I just started drawing my hand. And so I would draw my hand in, all kinds of different poses or whatever. It was kind of amazing, like depending on how much shading or how dark you were making the creases, my hand looked like it did not belong to a white person sometimes.
Right on.
But I don't feel like I finally took an art class like in school, because I was like, oh, cool, I'm gonna take an art class. And if I could have wiped my ass with all of my art projects in that class, I would have, once I saw everybody else's level of talent. And I was just like, oh yeah, this is not for me. I'm not this guy. So as far as a physical art, no, I don't think I've ever been stopped except for, by myself when I saw everybody, comparing myself to everybody else. I was like, well, I'm never going to be as good as any of these people. So I'm just going to quit.
Wow. Well, but you had successes with it for a while. I never did exactly what you did, but at one time I tried to replicate, I don't know, there was kind of that style, wasn't there, in the mid 70s? There was a real stylized font explosion. I remember trying to do that, and I liked it, but then I was going, well, this is way harder than I thought. That's what I thought.
Well, that is very kind of you to say.
On your hand, that's an interesting point, because when you're drawing a hand, did you know that's one of the more difficult things to draw well?
I could tell.
Yeah.
But I guess the reason that I did it is because no matter where I was, I always had one with me. And so I could always just, look at that and draw it. I didn't have to bring a picture of Popeye to draw or whatever. But yeah, I just figured I always had a hand with me, so I could just, now it would look all crazy because I keep banging my knuckles on stuff, so it would look like an abusive picture.
Well, good for you, though, for trying something that was more challenging. I've learned in the training that I've gotten in art, everybody is self-taught, but everybody tries to lean on mentors or somebody that can train you. And one of the things I learned is that the human body is actually the hardest thing to render in nature, because there's so many ins and outs. There's so many expressions of soft tissue and color changes. Like in the face, you're going to see several different shades. We all think of the brown tones, the cream tones, pink tones, but there's also greens and blues. And to do it well takes a study. And some people get it, and some people make it a lifelong study to do it right. So I think that's really interesting that artists gravitated towards figure drawing and faces and hands, or they went completely away and went landscapes and what else they saw, because there was a definite hard line of the people who want to pursue people and people who wanted to pursue geometry. So anyway, just to further your point about where this is coming from, why I would do artwork, is that I learned one day that it can be my own best friend. It can be the thing I do on my own, and I don't have to show it to anybody. There was definitely time when I would do drawings and then I would throw them away. I wasn't married to them, and it was okay. And it took a lot of work to get to the point where I felt like I could show my work to other people and have confidence in it. People can be harsh in their criticism of artwork.
Yeah, that is true. I wish I could say, yeah, everybody else, but I'm sure I'm just as guilty as most people of being a dick. It's funny that I had forgotten all about drawing those hands and those band names and that crazy font and stuff. And it occurs to me now that, remember I said that I had sort of, poor person laminated them like with just clear packing tape or whatever. I'm pretty sure I still have some of those in a box somewhere. And that's going to be like, I don't know, almost 40 years old. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. We got to pull that out. Have that on the wall behind you.
I should definitely leave that make that the only thing I leave to my kids.
Oh, they'll appreciate that. Dad was a hairband fan, or Dad was a metalhead, right?
Dad was a metalhead, and for some reason he kept drawing the middle finger. Stewart, what did you want to be when you grew up? I know that your professional artistic career happened a little bit late in life-ish.
Right.
So what was the path? How did you get to here?
I thought I wanted to get a pilot's license. I had no aspirations to be a commercial pilot. Out of junior high school, I had a math teacher he was a pilot, and one of my math classes was effectively ground school. I enjoyed it. I could see that I was over my head on some of the math side. So I went, well, maybe there are other things I can do with flying that doesn't require ground school and passing off and all that. So maybe there's other things I can do. So I moved on to other things. I thought maybe law would be of value. Turned out I was really good at remembering minutia, really good at remembering song lyrics from 1978, 75. But I wasn't really good at memorizing whole chapters of books, and that seemed to be the thing that was required to do that.
Do you think that you had an affinity for remembering shit that didn't matter because that's the stuff that you were into? And so, like, if you tried to memorize some text that you didn't give two shits about, it just didn't stick?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably universal, I'll bet. And maybe I didn't care enough about it, right? Whereas if it were the back of a Willie Mays baseball card, I had no problem devouring that stuff and telling you about RBIs and all that stuff. So maybe so.
That makes sense.
But law was interesting. And then I just had the feeling that there might be something for me in marketing, because I felt like I was the everyman. Thought I had kind of a marketing mind. I could tell you what I thought worked and what I thought didn't work, and marketing messages that were aimed for me.
Okay, give me an example of one that everybody knows, like a brand or whatever that doesn't work or you don't feel like it worked.
Tennis shoes. So back in the day, it was tennies is what we called them. So we're talking, 72, 71, something like that. Tennies. There were high tops that basketball players wore. There were canvas high tops. And even the brand escapes me right now. Everybody's screaming now, it was this, it was that. Whatever the brand was, the canvas high tops, All-Stars, Converse All-Stars. I remember going, that looks ugly. It functionally doesn't do anything I really need it to do. I love sports, but I'm horrible at basketball. And then they came out, they had a low top. And I went, well, but those are the ugly canvas Converse All-Stars, but low top. So I went, no way. And then right around then, Nike came out with the first one that was, and I think it was canvas. And I went, that looks really cool. And it had the blue logo on the side. And I was playing on a soccer team that had orange as their main color at the time. I got out paint. I don't know what kind of paint I used, but I painted the Nike swoosh orange to match my team. I remember going, now Nike's got it right. I like what they're doing. They didn't even have the sports stars do anything for them then. I just remember being an early adopter saying, I got to have those. That's really what I want. So I remember thinking Converse is not going to go anywhere. And they just didn't do what Nike did. Now, did they?
Right. They kind of went into a different direction. Yeah. Converse are all over the place, but they're more for style than function, like you're saying, because Converse, like you say, they have no ankle support and absolutely no
style
support. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I probably have 5 pair of them in different shades of orange.
Shoot, I picked the wrong example, didn't I?
The funny thing is I don't own a single pair of Nike anything at all. Like I don't own any Nike products at all, but I know that they're huge. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't speak to me.
Yeah.
But the Converse, to your point, when you put them on, it feels like you just strapped, like when you're driving down the street and you see like the tread has come off of an 18-wheeler tire. That's what it feels like. You just strapped to your foot. Like there's no support. There's no nothing. So I understand where you're going with that functionality.
It's funny. I still wear Nikes. My kids give me grief for it because it's the old dad version of their shoe. It's the Air Monarch. Evidently, it's well known as something that guys my age wear when they've kind of come through the dad track, and now they're kind of going out to pasture. But I like it specifically because it fits my wide foot. I always had really wide feet. It just works. That one works. I can't speak to the whole line of Nike products, but that one works.
Well, tell your kids to shut up or you're going to start wearing New Balance. Velcro New Balance.
Yeah, right. If I did that in my house, I'd owe them $1.
Oh, nice.
But that's so marketing was really interesting. And I got a little part-time job at a printer in town. I got used to doing some printing things and doing some basic rudimentary design with the pitograph pens and other tools of the trade. Ended up going to college at BYU. I went out there after having worked in food processing, which is basically what you could do in Northern California. Worked hard all summer. I went out, got accepted at the Y. I had enough money to pay for my apartment for a couple of months. I paid for my tuition. I paid for my books. I paid for just about everything in myself, but it wasn't going to last. It certainly wasn't going to take me to Christmas. So right after I got to BYU, I opened the phone book and I looked under advertising agencies and called 2 different places. The first one I called, they didn't pick up. The second one I called, they picked up. And all I did is I learned from a law class from my junior college. I had 1 year there at Butte Community College, home of Aaron Rodgers. So anyway, so I learned the technique in my law class about doing a non-job interview. Non-job interviews are basically, hey, I have interest in this field. I picked you because I feel like I have a lot to learn from you. I don't know you, but I would really appreciate having a half hour to sit down and ask you questions about your path. I'd like to understand some things that I can look forward to and also avoid. And the person I spoke with said, come on down. So I went down there. They said, I don't have a job for you, but hey, we've got this file drawer that we have all this cut out clip art. You know, you're actually using X-Acto knives. You're actually cutting and pasting. And they said, our files are all chaotic. If you could organize that, we'll pay you to do that. I said, sure, I'll do that.
Oh, wow.
So I did that for, I think it was about 3 days. And after I did 3 days, they said, you know, we could use somebody to do some paste up. And I said, yeah, I've done a little bit of that. 7 years later, they helped pay for the insurance for the birth of a couple of our children. My wife and I met at BYU, and it turned out being a very positive thing for me because I was able to work in the field that I ended up saying, this is my major, this is where I'm headed. My wife was kind enough to go along for the ride. And then, you know, here we are 40 years later, just about. I started work at that advertising agency in 83. So how about that?
Wow. Sterling, Cooper, Draper, Price, and Anstead.
That was my path. It took me right into marketing and right into strategic planning, and design was part of it. So I was always doing art, but I also found out that, I did have some chops in copywriting and editing and producing, and it served me well. It's been good to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, I bet, because one of the hardest parts of being an entrepreneur in any field is marketing yourself. So I'm sure all of that came in handy when you decided to actually become a professional artist.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Hey, Streetwalkers, Steve here. I'm proud to announce the newest and coolest sponsor of Fascination Street podcast, Bravago Hard Seltzer. Go bold. Grill a tomahawk steak just for you on a Tuesday. Run your sprinklers twice in a row. Wear 2 different socks to your sister's wedding. Play golf with 2 balls from the ladies' tee box. However you go bold, do it with Bravago Bold Seltzer, the newest and boldest hard seltzer out there, with flavors like Sweet Freak, Vanilla Orange Cream, Chill Out, Rainier Cherry, and Sucker Punch, Strawberry Lemon. These seltzers pack an intense flavor and 5.1% alcohol by volume, with between 110 and 120 calories each. Find a store or purchase online at drinkbravago.com. Must be 21 or older to purchase or consume. Please drink responsibly. Go bold.
Let's get back into it.
I'm sure it was slow, but tell me how you came to be, Stewart Anstead the Great.
Well, thank you for that. That's a helpful question because it is an interesting and longer route, as you say. It wasn't an overnight thing. I just always liked the various styles of artists. I liked those paint dabs. There was something about it that really attracted me. I don't know if you like the lines of the logos that you drew and stuff, if that's the graphic art style that you really liked. And if you changed that in your interest in art. I went from that linear art, the drawing lines and hard lines and stuff, to this softer approach. And I went, wow, I really like that. I wonder if that's something I could pick up for fun. I took evenings when the kids were asleep and I started doing just a few little pieces. And I went, well, I like this. It was acrylic and it was very forgiving, which was not the way watercolor was for me. You could really screw up and end up with something that looked pretty good.
Yeah, ask Bob Ross.
Well, that guy, listen, hey, marketer, right? PBS, the government did his marketing for him.
Indeed.
But I went, that's something I think I want to keep trying. And to my wife's credit, she put up with me spending time doing that, maybe versus other things. And even today, her work as a junior high school teacher has allowed me to have the base to work from. You have to have insurance, and artists aren't famous for not producing some of that baseline stuff. It can be up and down. But I like that impressionistic thing. that ended up taking me to an art club that, there was some nice comments there and some good suggestions, recommendations. And then we'd have art shows and my works would sell. And then there are people whispering in my ear, hey, well, you may want to come over and put stuff in our gallery. And that was hit or miss, but it was kind of nice. They say that you can create a painting and sell it. And if you do that, you've sold a painting. If you sell 2 paintings, you have a business because it's somebody else likes it too, right? So I've had that experience of having one sale and then another sale, and then someone tells someone else, and there's a referral aspect that ended up being really helpful when social media came along, because there was an intimacy of referral that went on in that world.
So you are in Utah, right?
I am.
Are you far from Park City?
I'm 1 hour drive or less.
Okay. So I have been to Park City. My wife was doing some work in Evanston, Wyoming. I went out and hung out with her while she was doing her thing, and we went to Park City a couple of times. And there is a gallery in Park City. I think either now or previously you had some work there.
Correct.
Now, is that the same gallery that has a Banksy spray painted on the side of the building?
No. There's 2 or 3 Banksys in Park City. The more famous one is a cameraman, like it was like around the Sundance Film Festival, reaching down and admiring a flower, daisy or something like that. Anyway, in that old town section, there's 3. The gallery that I showed for many years was the Wilshire. It was just down the hill from that, not very far. So did you get to see that in person?
The one that is on the outside of, it's on a wall, and it's kind of small and it's real low, and it was covered in like plexiglass and all kinds of crazy shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it looked really cool. Really cool. Last month, my wife and I took a trip to Houston to go visit some friends. We just happened to be in this weird part of the city. I don't know. And they were like, oh, hey, there's this gallery over here that we like. And we were like, okay, cool. Never heard of it. Let's go. And it was a gallery that was basically, it was somebody's private collection. And then when their husband died, they just turned it into this huge gallery. So like in May, I got to stand 1 inch away from an Andy Warhol, Picasso, Klimt.
Gustav, yes.
Gustav Klimt. They had a whole ton of that dude. I mean, it was the craziest thing. Oh, and a Jackson Pollock. I'm just like, this is the greatest thing ever.
Absolutely.
I like all of the different styles. And I think that, when we're talking about whether it's straight, fine lines or sort of nebulous outlines or whatever, I think all those people I just named kind of encompass that, right? Because Andy Warhol, he's doing soup cans that have very, very defined lines. And then you go into Picasso, who's doing whatever the fuck he wants, and then, of course, Jackson Pollock, he just threw up all over the canvas. But I think it's really cool that, there's all these different styles, and I'm looking behind you at a work in progress. Yeah. I'm super curious how you happened upon this style. I didn't even know how to explain that. So if you could describe that style and then tell me how you came across it.
Sure. Well, first, I'm glad that you're saying that you're attracted to a lot of different art styles. I think there's a lot to be learned from so many different ways of approaching art.
I'm even into like murals and stuff like that. So like this thing behind me that you're seeing.
Yeah.
That is on canvas, and that's all spray paint. It was spray painted by a street artist here in San Antonio named Colton Valentine. He's a previous guest, and he does murals on the side of buildings all over San Antonio, and he flies to different places and does murals and stuff.
Sweet.
And he did that. And the thing that blows me away is that he used spray cans to do that whole thing, and it just freaks me out every time. I just can't believe it.
I love it.
It's so
Isn't
dope.
that great?
It's amazing. Like I didn't even know that was possible. Yeah, there's only one. Yeah, that's an actual canvas. It's all structured. Textured and stuff.
Sweet. Yeah, make sure you varnish that and frame it.
I don't know what that means.
Well, varnishing is going to take the UV effects of the bad lighting on it, the harsh light, so it protects it, so it's not going to fade.
So like literally cover it like with like a clear coated whatever?
Yeah, I would talk to a framer and say, here's what I've got. Here's the type of paint it is. Here's the substrate it's on. I want to preserve it. What do you recommend? And then I would call 2 or 3 different places and see when it triangulates and they all say to do the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. I would do that.
Cool. Great tip. Thanks.
That's really neat. You bet.
I love it.
I wondered where that logo came from. I've seen it I've been following you for years. So now I know.
I came up with it. I didn't draw it, but I designed it, and then I paid somebody to draw the logo, and I was using the logo for everything. And then when I interviewed Colton Valentine, that mural artist, he does a lot of sports stuff. Like he did this huge, it's a 6-piece mural on canvas that he did kind of right after Kobe died. And it's super dope.
Cool, man.
You can follow him on Instagram or whatever.
Check
he
it
shows
out.
all the stuff there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But when he did that, it just made me love that logo even more.
I love it. Well, it's not far off from the style that you were just referencing behind me, because it's what you can see in the images you've seen already of my stuff online. It looks like it's decayed out. There's some kind of impact, some kind of scraping, scrubbing, some kind of chemical something happening that's decaying it, which is why I call it the DK series, the letter D, the letter K, the DK series. And so I've applied that to many things. What you see behind me, your listeners won't see it, but it's a bison that is in front of a vintage food label. In this case, I think it's Buffalo brand. I think it was apples from Canada, but they're legitimate, actual old labels that I then sample up. I paint them larger, and then I'm putting, in this case, it's a wild animal in front of it, and then I'm just tearing it up. I'm applying many techniques that I've either learned or created myself. In some cases, it's even a chemical that's not harsh for humans if I'm able to wash it off. But it's caustic enough that it's going to eat right through stuff. So I'm created that myself. That's a style that I've applied to many things, including sports and car racing, vintage mostly. I tend to do vintage cars, vintage motorcycles, old baseball, old football. I don't know, for some reason, I just dig that. So I explore many themes within that DK series.
Got you. And this is a thing that you just came up with, this style?
Yeah, it evolved. I liked doing stuff that was photorealistic. And after a while I went, or I could just take a photograph and then call it good.
Right.
So the joy was no longer there to try to render something perfectly, because there's many people who do that even better than I do. And after a while, when I look at it, I'm going, what's the art here? What is it doing for me? And it wasn't doing anything for me.
Gotcha.
So I got away from that and I went, all right, well, what's possible? And it was splatters. It was gouges. It was getting out the sander. It was those things really gave me an exciting texture that maybe other people are doing the same thing. I don't know. Maybe they are, but they're not going to look like me because I'm putting it together the way I put it together. If I'm doing a Ken Miles piece or if I'm doing a Paul Newman piece, those kind of things, the race cars that have grit and there's effort and pain, that's sports. That's what gets me excited.
Now, you mentioned Ken Miles and Paul Newman. I believe we have some common, I don't want to say friends, acquaintances along those lines. Adam Carolla owns almost all of the Paul Newman race cars. He's a previous guest. And also Matt, the moderator, DeAndrea.
Absolutely.
Super into cars and all the good stuff. And they have CarCast together. And he's also a previous guest 2 times. Tell me how, if I understand correctly, at least Adam Carolla has a piece or 2 of yours.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those pieces? Or are they private?
Sure. Well, there's aspects of both. But yeah, they're not very private because they're often hung right behind his shoulder when he's interviewed on other shows.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's dang cool. Dan Patrick's show, for one thing, I did a screen grab of that last year, I think it was, where there they were. And it was kind of like, well, look at that. And it's not like Adam's giving my name and my phone number and my email and stuff. But when he does that, it means a lot to me because it means he really likes it enough that he's okay with it being in the background. And that was kind of a fun little thing that evolved, and it started with the Paul Newman piece. He owns the Porsche 935, which Newman ran in '79 at Le Mans. And, he's a legitimate racer. He was part of the racing team, and my goodness, that particular car, that particular 935 is probably my favorite modern race car. Modern meaning, I would say, in my adult lifetime. The stuff that's before that, I love the open wheel, the Mario Andretti stuff, the early Indy stuff. I really love those cars. Are beautiful. I still like Indy and I still like open wheel very much, but there's something about the vintage. There's something about that. The 935 is not open wheel, but it was a legitimate race car. And Paul Newman was obviously a movie star, part of the wallpaper of my life as well. Just something I know that he cared about, Adam cared about. So he owns that one. He owns, there's a few different ones. The Bobby Allison Datsun 510 BRE, which he was a guest driver to drive that Datsun. And if you're old like me, you know that Nissan used to be called Datsun. Mm-hmm. They were into the race car market too. And so I depicted Bobby Allison at Laguna Seca in the 70s when he was a guest driver, who I got to meet, by the way. I got to meet Bobby Allison.
Oh, wow.
In the early 80s. Such a solid dude. I happened to be in the area as a LDS missionary in Alabama and was right, I don't know, I was 2 miles away from Willie Mays' house and from Bobby Allison's house. And yes, I went by Willie Mays' house, and yes, I went by Bobby's house. We had some connections with the Allisons, and before we got the chance to meet Bobby, who was coming home from dinner, I think that's what it was, they took us into the family's main auto shop that was just a separate building off of their house. And we were given a tour by Bobby's son, Davey. I didn't know Davey from anybody. You know, he was a rising star and did some amazing things before he passed. But that was really cool. What a neat thing. So I had a definite connection to the car that Adam acquired, this BRE. And then, of course, he had this Nissan that was a 300ZX, which I think he recently sold. But those three cars just depicted real specific moments in time, and very much like the work I do. You know, Rudy Ruettiger, the Rudy, that guy.
Yeah.
The movie, football player. All right, so I did a piece for him. And what I did was I thought in my brain, the way I go about these things is nobody needs something they already have a photo of.
Right.
They really don't. And that's what happens all the time in sports art is you see, here's another picture of Josh Gibson. It's the same one we've all seen a million times, and it's painted again and again. All right, I like them, but if it's going to be special and it's going to be owned by that person, what would they like? And in Rudy's case, you can see old footage, but it's always from one direction. I went behind it, repurposed characters that fit the postures of the people in the play when he made this famous tackle. You know, one of the very few plays he got to play, but he made this tackle. It's from an angle that he hadn't seen, and he helped produce the movie. So he looked at that and he goes, oh, well, I haven't seen this angle before. It was kind of nice to do something different. That's what I did with the race cars that Adam has. And that's what I've done with baseball. For example, yeah, I typically do vintage baseball, which I love. But I also did one, Madison Baumgartner was obviously a phenomenon. Owned the World Series the year that they beat Kansas City. I did a wide painting that shows his wingspan, because he tended to throw with his arms straight out, and then he went through his follow through. So I did a piece like that. I sent a picture of that to the San Francisco Giants, and they acquired it. I don't know who has it now. These are just kind of weird little one-offs, things that I care about that catch my attention. So if it's the DK series, it's stuff that's vintage, stuff that's label-based. You see that on my website that's featuring just the DK series. If it's the automotive world, there's another website for that. So it's stewartanstead.com for the cars, vintage bikes. And it's Anstead Arts for the DK series. Decorators tend to have more interest in that. They all look like something I made, but I'm not afraid of branching out and trying something different.
Okay, I know that you are a licensed Shelby American artist. Like, you're allowed to paint Shelbys? Is that how that works?
I am.
How did that happen? That sounds like a arduous task.
Mostly, hey, these organizations, they want to protect their brand. That's what they care about. I came at that as kind of a strange route. I live an hour and a half drive away from the Bonneville Speedway, which you end up being quite close to when you visited Evanston. Probably didn't know it.
Did not.
So as people can picture, it's just kind of like a lunar landscape, flat and super white. And then you have blue sky. So it's very intense when you visit it.
So this is like the Bonneville Salt Flats, that kind
Absolutely.
of thing? Okay. That's where they do all the land speed records and stuff?
That's right.
Okay.
They've had a very long history of killer racing out there. I started doing pieces based on people I met online, and went out there myself, and took pictures, and then gathered other material. And it's some of my favorite stuff is stuff on the salt flats. There's the Moon Eyes branded coupe that they ran. It's bright yellow. You can't miss it. It has its historic value, and it catches the attention of the people who own these cars, who, have museums based on these cars. And then that route took me to, the Carroll Shelby stuff. And so I had conversations with them and said, here's what I do. And they said, here's what you need to do to become licensed. So I submitted a couple sample pieces that feature the Mustangs and Cobras and stuff. And that's how I connected to that. All these things just kind of branch out. Isn't that interesting that some people's passions, like Adam's passion, Matt DeAndrea's passions, have that real specific world. Another weird branch of it is that I went to Kentucky with my wife. She had some business out there in the spring. So there at Churchill Downs, we got a tour, and I went, I want to do Secretariat. That was a part of my life. I grew up with Secretariat, 73. I remember the race. I watched it on TV, probably the Wild World of Sports, but I don't quite remember. But either way, it was famous and popular, and there we were. So I've done a piece featuring Secretariat, but from a unique angle.
Oh, wow.
But racing, I think in general, is where people kind of gets their blood going. And I love the gearheads. I love the people who care deeply about cars, and they customize, and they go to shows, and they want to show the thing that they do really well. And what I've learned for sure in any of these disciplines is that it matters very deeply to a large group of people who share that passion. And if you come in as a newbie and you think you can pass off something that isn't correct, if the car's not right, man, I had some interesting feedback on my first rendering of an early Shelby. They said, you got to get this right. You got to get that right. They will tell you. They don't hesitate to say, dude, you're off, and here's what's wrong, and where's this? So I know I'm treading lightly in these worlds, but people like Matt DeAndrea, other folks that care, but also say, you know what, here, let me give you some help. Matt was very helpful in me getting some photos of the various cars that I did that ended up in Adam's collection. So I appreciate those kind of things, but that's a fun path. Dude, if you can make a living doing this kind of work, that isn't work. I look forward to waking up every morning. I look forward to going, which one of these pieces will I be working on today? What's my objective? What's my timeline? But I'm never without something to paint. Never. I'm never looking at a blank canvas going, what would be interesting? No, I've got 50 pieces I'd like to do right now.
Oh, wow. Well, hopefully one of them is going to be an odd angle of Jay Leno rolling in the Hemi under glass.
Dang it.
Paint that and send it to him.
Dang it. That guy he's a weeble. He's bouncing back.
That guy's
That's
amazing.
for sure. Yeah.
Stuart, where can people find out more? I know you hit your 2 different web addresses again, but go ahead and hit those again, and then tell people where they can find you on social media to learn more about what you do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So the DK series, that's Anstead Arts with an S.com. The vintage racers, the bikes, and the cars are at stewartanstead.com. And that's StewartAnstead. That's my name. And then I'm pretty accessible. You could Google me and find me easily. But my social, I'm typically at Anstead Media on Instagram. It's on Twitter and Facebook. You know how the internet does. You throw something out there and it just kind of, it's out there. So I'm pretty easy to find.
It is definitely out there once it's out there. I know this might be a dumb question because I feel like the answer is huge, but before I let you go, is there anything we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you about that you specifically wanted to talk about today?
I don't think so. I think you were quite thorough in your research, which I really appreciate that a lot. But I noticed that that's what you do anyway. Mostly, I'm really happy that people kind of help each other out. I feel like in the world we live in now, that artists need support, not just me. I think people who create something beautiful ought to be considered, ought to be supported. musicians. You've had a series of different types of artists on your show over the years, and all of them deserve attention. And you just need to pick something that catches your attention. People need to just support them and care about them. And if they just focus on one artist, that's great. Or if there's an arts community, support them. It goes a long way. And I really feel like our culture is way better off when there's lots of voices and not being squashed. I don't think that serves anybody. Hearing more voices is better than hearing no voices.
Love it. What a wonderful note to go out on. Stewart Anstead, Anstead Arts. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and your hectic painting everything all over the place schedule to hang out and let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street, man. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you very much. Great opportunity.
100% my pleasure.
Let's chat again.
Oh, absolutely, dude. Thank you so very much. And you have a great rest of your week, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take it easy.
All right.
Bye-bye. Opening music is the song FSP Theme, written, performed, and provided by Ambush Venn. Closing music is from the song Say My Name off the 2021 album Underdog Anthems, used with permission from Jax Hollow. If you like the show, tell a friend. Subscribe and rate and review the show on iTunes and wherever else you download podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. All the episodes are available there as well. Check me out on Vero at Fascination Street Pod and TikTok at Fascination Street Pod. And again, thanks for listening.